Welcome to the Blueprint Podcast, where we throw out the old blueprint so you can become who you were always meant to be. I'm your host, Jason Smith, and if you haven't already, make sure you click the subscribe button and share this podcast with your friends on social media and tag me in it at JBirdFit. Today, I have a very special guest for you, Dr. Kelly Brogan. Kelly is a holistic psychiatrist and New York Times best-selling author. Dr. Brogan has written several influential books, including A Mind of Your Own, Own Yourself, and the children's book, A Time for Rain. She also co-edited the landmark textbook, Integrative Therapies for Depression. Dr. Brogan is the founder of the online healing program, Vital Mind Reset, and the membership community, Vital Life Project. She completed her psychiatric training and fellowship at NYU Medical Center after graduating from Cornell University Medical College and holds a BS in Systems Neuroscience from MIT. Dr. Brogan specializes in a root cause resolution approach to psychiatric syndromes and symptoms. Dr. Kelly Brogan, welcome to the Blueprint Podcast. I actually had a bunch of stuff for you, and I've been listening to your podcast and taking a little bit of notes here and there, seeing you on Know Thyself and a few others. What's interesting is the other day, I needed something to watch. So I was just looking and I hopped on Amazon Prime and up pops Heal. And I had watched Heal years ago when I was a police officer and out on the street every day. And so when you first come across that type of information, you're looking at it, I know that I need this, but there's still a lot of like rejection and
Many
resistance.
bridges to cross.
Yeah. And you're just looking at it like, no. And so I found it interesting that I'd already set up a podcast with you. And then I sit down, I'm looking for something to watch. Amazon says, hey, you should watch this again from 2017. So I did. And as I'm watching that and making dinner, I see little Kelly pop up. I'm like,
Oh, my
look at
barrel
that.
curl.
Yeah. And I was
Weird.
cracking up. I'm like, holy smokes. It's just very interesting. The little synchronicities that we get that kind of move you in this right direction to know that we are doing the right thing. I'm a former police officer. So for me, this podcast thing is like totally secondary. I never thought that I'd be doing something like this. It wasn't on my bingo card that I would lean in and create a podcast called The Blueprint, with the mantra being healing the relationship that you have with yourself. And here we are. I get to speak with people like you. It's so cool to be able to step into this and to be able to do that. Kelly Brogan, welcome to the Blueprint Podcast. Tell everybody who you are and who you help.
Oh, wow. You have a few hours? Nutshell, but it's been a winding path for sure. So let's see. I thank you. It's amazing to be with you because I come from a law enforcement family, and my dad is FBI DEA, and I have about 40 uncles who are cops, and I'm very familiar with so many aspects of the lifestyle, the psychology, and interestingly, in my more recent exploration of masculinity and femininity and these dynamics, I've really come to appreciate how many masculine values my dad brought to the table because of his line of work, and how much I was in rejection, really, of like throwing the baby out with the bathwater, of a lot of what felt unsafe, I guess, about waking up with a gun on the counter kind of a thing. I suppose the best place to start is that I am credentialed as a very conventional card-carrying cult member of the allopathic system, and was so much a believer in the pharmaceutically based approach to human suffering and struggling that I specialized in prescribing to pregnant and breastfeeding women. So I was one of the first 300 so-called reproductive psychiatrists, which means that I was especially focused and trained to meet the needs of the 1 in 4 women who were entering into pregnancy either on a medication or considering a medication, and who were struggling with postpartum psychosis or depression. And it wasn't until about 10 months postpartum, my own first pregnancy, that I experienced a rupture of my worldview and cognitive dissonance that is associated with that, when I was diagnosed with my own first condition. I had never really been on that side of the desk before and was living a very unconscious life. I never exercised. I took birth control. I dyed my hair black. I ate McDonald's and candy and drank 6 cups of coffee a day as a classic stress addicted New Yorker. And I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which I'm sure many of your female listeners are familiar with. It's autoimmune condition, so-called autoimmune condition. I've come to even challenge that construct of autoimmunity, but that's another conversation. And I didn't want to take the prescription. It was fine for my patients to do for the rest of their life, but I did not want to walk that piece of paper down to CVS every month. No, thank you. So let's call it sacred laziness. I don't know, but I was delivered to an alternative path through basic naturopathy and lifestyle change and really refining my diet. So I was raised Italian American and I'm second generation. And so all I ate was bread and cheese all day long. And I made some basic adjustments to my diet, took out gluten and dairy, and I saw in black and white my antibodies come into the normal range, my TSH normalize. And I was, instead of feeling inspired and excited, I was really rageful. So that was the beginning of now I understand it to be my archetypal journey into adulthood and into self-actualization, which was really meeting a lot of my unacknowledged parental rage that I was able to neatly project onto the system, the medical system that had trained me, where I felt I took my sword out of its sheath because I felt not only betrayed by the industry I had pledged my allegiance to, so the medical system, but my trainers. So like they lied to me. They didn't tell me that I could put a chronic illness into remission. They didn't tell me that nutrition mattered. I had 1 hour of nutrition education in my entire blood, sweat, and tears, $200,000 of debt training. And the industry didn't tell me that there was an option other than pharmaceuticals when it comes to meeting the seeming demands of these kinds of recidivistic symptoms. And so I became an obsessive researcher, as you do when you're readying for battle. You're putting all of your resources into being right about how wronged you were or are. And so I really steeped in this victim consciousness of the system did this to me. And not only me, look at these female patients that I'm working with. They've been lied to also. They were told that they had a chemical imbalance. They were told that they needed these medications for life. They were told that something is fundamentally broken about them. And I am here to say that nothing is wrong with them. And I dedicated myself with a passion and a zeal that could only come from this like unlocked vital force energy that had been quietly dormant, sleeping, waiting for this moment. And so I did that. I did that angry activist thing for a number of years, like a decade. Published a book with an exploding pill on the cover that became a grassroots New York Times bestseller. And I started to recruit clinical volunteers to help me publish the outcomes that I was seeing in my practice that ultimately ended up being like medical history making, like never before published in medical literature. Examples like Graves' disease that you could put into remission just through lifestyle change without any radiotherapy or surgery. It's not that's never happened before, but I guess nobody took the time to publish it because you're doing that on your own dime when you're not in a pharma-funded trial. And I manifested a mentor named Dr. Nicholas Gonzalez, who some may have heard of. I think he is one of the most important clinicians to ever exist. And he had an extraordinarily powerful healing field that I had the great honor of being a part of for the last year of his life. And when he died very suddenly, I encountered yet another rupture, like yet another initiation in my process. And it's interesting because I've just gone through another one very recently that has to do with my business, actually. It's never fucking ending, never ending this path. And I was reflecting on it because they always start the same way, these ruptures. I experienced the dissolution of two marriages and the loss of my mentor and just even leaving my clinical practice and leaving my identity as an activist. And all of these ruptures that I experienced, they start with, it's okay, like there's a movie screen, right, in front of you. And there's a little tear in the screen. And I'm like, oh, it's a tear. Fuck, that sucks. We'll just fix it. We'll just repair it. And then a couple days go by, a couple weeks go by, and the tear is just like getting bigger and bigger. And it feels like nothing I could do. And now the whole screen is torn. Like the fucking movie's over, right? Like the whole thing is done. And there's no pasting it back together. Like it's not even possible. And so that feeling of I'm on my knees, like negotiating with God. Please, please, anything but this. And I've just been through that many times with death and loss and endings and my identity, where I thought I had my identity on lock in a particular way. And even as a mother, that's probably actually the most humbling version of this kind of terrain that I've walked is I thought that I was really succeeding as a mom, like this like spiritual warrior of a mom who's ending all the cycles of her mother line. And as my daughters entered into their teen years, I was delivered a different narrative. And luckily, thankfully, fortunately, I had done enough of the work that now is in my latest book, The Reclaimed Woman, that I recognized this opportunity for yet more humbling release and surrender of what I thought needed to be my story about myself. So, yeah, so I've been through many turns of the spiral that have led me to, I guess, in some ways, specialize in the terrain of victim consciousness, identifying its markers, its signature. And really, my interest is in understanding how we participate in our own subjugation, our own suffering, and how we give our power away.
Oh, we can't admit that, can we?
It's uncomfortable just for a moment, but
Even
it's
just to
all worth it.
consider it, it just like it's this full body experience that what do you mean I have to take ownership of things that I didn't do?
Yeah, I think we're done to me. Yeah, and the real plot twist is like the more we are focused, and obviously my perspectives come as a woman, but the more we are focused on things that need to change, people who need to apologize, people who need to see it. My shadow lives under the banner of I'll get you to see. And I've become a rhetorical expert. Like I can argue it, it's all my points, and I have all the data and science, and I would have slayed as an attorney probably. And it turns out that's not actually, it's not the path to empowerment. And who cares about what is empowerment? What does that even mean? It's what you referenced, right? It's this journey home to yourself, to the recollection of the pieces of yourself that you've disavowed and projected, rejected, and put on the bad guy outside of you, or the bad system, or the bad ideology. And I think we came here, I imagine you might agree, like to play this game. Like we came here to go on this journey, and the dividends, like the rewards, come in the form of aliveness. Like when I look back on videos of myself or pictures of myself, I look less alive than I do and certainly feel today. And so maybe that's the goal, is to walk this path, collecting these pieces of ourselves that are holding our own aliveness, and to feel more animated, to feel more of this vital force that we incarnated to channel through this vessel. I do think that's the play here. And we end up, just think about like your greatest conflict in your life right now, not you personally, but maybe anybody's listening. If you think about what is the one thing you hate about your life right now, what is the one hot spot that if you just tell yourself, if that would get resolved, I would be fine, right? If this, then that. And I can convince you that you have enormous amounts of erotic energy, of literal, like creative life force tied up in that struggle. And if you learn the steps to releasing that, which is not a will based game, it's not, oh, I'm going to wake up and just let it go. It doesn't work that way. And in fact, you can fuel the very thing, right? It's like the pink elephant thing or whatever they say, don't think of a pink elephant. It doesn't work that way. It's an alchemical process. And when you've done it, because all of a sudden, something that would have really bothered you just doesn't. You become unbothered in this beautiful, playful, like fun way that isn't a performance, and it's not something you're trying at. And that's a lot of what I've focused on more recently in my life, is supporting myself and other women in the experience of their own feminine nature without trying, because it's not a chasing femininity thing and it's not a fighting for your power. game. And trust me, because I've tried both of those things. And that's
Right.
how I know from firsthand experience that it's a bait and switch. So I've really come to interest myself in all of these poor bargains that we make, especially as women, where we suppress our awareness that it's not the way. I know this isn't the way. And yet I know this isn't the guy. I know this isn't the dress. I know this isn't the job. I know this isn't the conversation I should be having, but somehow I'm having it and it's fine. Like that poor bargain architecture, once you identify that in your life, you won't take the bait ever again. And all of that energy just gets to be yours instead of leaking it out and peddling it into these conflicts and disappointment and resentment and the complaint culture that is so normalized today, where we imagine that's how you connect to other people is just like find something that you can both complain about. And I really had to get to an enough is enough
That's
moment
how
to
a lot of relationships are forged these days. Unfortunately, you can hop online, look at any comment section or any group that talks about attachment styles. You very quickly figure out that we're all connecting through our pain and other things that have been our challenges and our struggles. What if there was a shift? What if we started looking at things a little bit differently? What if we zoomed out for a second and took on a different perspective and we became the observer of the situation that we're currently in and going through? Do we really need to be a part of a group where all we talk about are the struggles, the pain, the strife, the anger, the frustration, irritation, sadness, loneliness, depression, and anger? And then that becomes the structure and format for which you're living your life for the rest of your life. We've already seen that play out with our caregivers, our parents, the eldest generation that's out there right now. Every For all the Gen Xers and the elder millennials out there that are struggling even still to extend a certain amount of grace to their parents, regardless of the circumstances, to be able to see that they truly were doing the best they could with the tools that were available to them at the time. And forgiveness is a whole other conversation, and I leave that up to the individual to determine what they need to do with that. But to be able to recognize that even as a parent, you did the best that you could as well with the tools that you had. But we have a gift in today's society where we have free information via YouTube and the internet and access to professionals that can help guide you through the process of being able to get to the place of that self forgiveness and that identification of self and knowing who you are, where you're going, what you're doing, and the why behind why you're doing it. And ultimately, you can get to the place where it's as your parents are at the end stages of their lives, you can accept where you are in this place in the world and begin to live your own life and focus on your own journey and grow in new and different ways at any time in life. And ultimately, it's a freeing experience to get to that place to say, you know what, I can love you or accept you as you are, and I don't need to fix or change you or have you be any different for me. But I also don't necessarily need you full time in my life.
yeah. I have become a huge zealot about a modality called family constellation. Have you heard of it?
Mm-mm.
Okay. Oh, that's exciting. Okay. Because I literally am like a door to door salesman. Like I have like pamphlets I'm handing out all the time because it's just impacted my life so profoundly. I'm actually being trained currently by my teacher, Amerly. And there are a lot of tenets that, okay. So, first of all, the reason I love it is because I haven't found many modalities that embrace what I would call like sovereign consciousness, right? Without right, so many therapists. So I'm a psychiatrist. I was trained to view symptoms as a problem. Okay. So parts work and family constellation and a few other modalities involve the radical embrace that you just referenced towards your family, really focused on your own inner dimensions, right? So until you can orient towards yourself without needing to soothe the angry part, without needing to convince the selfish part to give, without needing to coerce any part of yourself into seeing things differently than that part currently does, you're not offering belonging to your inner dimensions. And you will have that mirrored holofractal experience of outside aspects of your lived life not belonging either. You don't want them to be there, right? So, one of the tenets of family constellation is that you give order to your system by offering belonging. Okay. And you create the natural hierarchy, the order of things, which means it's normally temporal. So who came first? Okay. So your parents came before you, and then you came before your younger sibling. So that's a natural hierarchy. Okay. You organize the system based on that, and you allow belonging to extend to even the perpetrators in the system. So anyone excluded from the system. Okay, so let's say the uncle you stopped talking to, everyone in your nuclear family stopped talking to 20 years ago. That person belongs. Okay. That person is a part of your system. And the disorders in the system, miscarriages, abortions, excluded family members, actually can show up in your life patterns with regard to sex and love and money through loyalties that you have to the excluded people. Okay. So, for an example, let's say that you were born after your mom miscarried or terminated. You may have certain subconscious loyalties to that now dead being, right? That are expressed through your incomplete embrace of your life, right? So your financial struggles or, right, your own patterns with miscarriage or in dynamics in your relationship, right? So one of the things that I have taken away from that, I apply in my own life and in my own work, which is to resolve this sense of superiority, right? So in family constellation, there's no forgiveness. Why? Because forgiveness, in its colloquial understanding, involves a superior to inferior posture, right? So I am giving something to you that you can't give to yourself. In family constellation, it's more about seeing yourself in the perpetrator. Okay, that's a plot twist, right? Because
Mhm.
instead of saying, I now accept that you did this thing, yes, accept what has happened, but also go this one step farther and see if you can see yourself in the person you are blaming for your struggle, and with great validity, perhaps, right? There was an experience of abuse and you were a child, etc. In this experience, I have learned to apply that to my own self. So the person who was prescribing to pregnant women, it's very easy to think that now, many books later, and history making programs, and all my knowledge and awareness, and all the things that I've come to understand, that I'm better now than that gal on Madison Avenue with her barrel curl blowout who was writing a Zoloft prescription to a pregnant lady. I'm very committed to not believing that, to the extent that I'm not even totally sure that the awakened, actualized, enlightened path of self discovery brings you closer to anything approximating a better human. I think the only thing that shifts is my awareness. So now, when I snap at my daughter because she's trying to talk to me while I'm doing something, the only difference between the kind of mom I am now and the kind of mom I was when I had no idea that I was like emotionally immature, raised by emotionally immature parents in a legacy of emotional immaturity, passing it on to my daughters while thinking I'm doing something totally different, is that I am aware when I'm doing it that I have a choice to respond differently. And maybe I don't take that choice in the moment, but shortly thereafter, I can. I can say, hey, I you did nothing to invoke that, and that's on me, and I'm totally here with you now. So I have choices because of the awareness. That's the difference in the life. So if I'm not better now than I was before, then I can also resolve the chronological snobbery of my mother line, for example, and I can ask a question I've been told is a very powerful question for women to ask, and I'm sure the equivalent works for men, which is, do I really believe that I'm superior to my mom? Am I really better than my mom? And when I've asked this, I put on an event called Audacious Embodiment last year, and I asked this to a room full of 100 women, and everyone raised their hand. Yeah, I'm better at so many things. I just know so many more things. I'm like a better woman than my mom was. She like did a lot of shit wrong. And what I like mischievously invite women to consider is the possibility that actually you're not. What if you're not actually superior in any dimension than your mom is? What protest arises inside of you when I say that? It's the part of you that needs to believe that you've won against this woman who gave birth to you, right? That you have shown her that you have more than she ever gave you credit for a thing. And that is a zero-sum game psychology, right? So that's ultimately another symptom of victim consciousness. If we cannot get to the place where everyone is allowed to exist and belongs exactly as they are, we will continue to find ways to imagine that we are superior. And especially in the truther realm. So as like a tried and true member of that movement, I, in many moments of my experience, would have imagined myself superior to the woman who's chain smoking, eating Cheetos, and watching CNN. 100%. And to get to the place where I no longer imagine that I have any idea how somebody else should be living their life, where I no longer imagine that it's a spiritual meritocracy and that there are certain steps you're supposed to follow that make you a good spiritual person doing the good spiritual thing. It requires that I actually develop intimacy with the part of me that is just like somebody who I would judge. So let's say might judge my mom for being reactive or volatile or whatever, or let's say you had experiences of abuse. That's where the family constellation perspective of seeing myself in the perpetrator, it's Occam's razor, the most direct path to your reclamation is to say, you know what? I have that too. I am that too. But like really mean it, really see it. And through this work, I call it wearing the villain crown. Through this work, I have come to see that I am all of it. Given certain circumstances, could be the murderer, the cheater, the liar, the small, scared coward, the person who is the know-it-all, the person who's lazy, the person who's never follows through, who has horrible integrity of word. I am and can be all of it. And when I expand my permission field to be the piece of shit who's failed, and especially when I did this work as a mother, when I allowed myself to be the mother who failed, I was able to cross a threshold of like sober perspective on myself that withdrew so much energy of projection onto other people that resulted in all of this creative output. So you might be like, what is the relationship between owning your own shittiness and then creating amazing things in the world or developing like new hobbies and interests? In this time, I've explored all sorts of different forms of dance. I've learned how to sew. I've learned how to sing. Like my business has absolutely exploded. And the relationship to what actually was going on in my personal life, which is basically like over and over again being delivered reflections that I am not who I wish I was. And that maybe it would serve me to look at how it is that I am exactly that which I judge, right? How it is that like the most prohibited, shameful realms of like womanhood, I'm already there, right? I'm already doing the embarrassing, stupid, irresponsible, reckless thing or whatever. And really making a practice of trying on every criticism that comes my way. And thankfully, there are many that come my way. And then also, anytime I feel judgmental of another, taking that opportunity to meet a part of myself. This work has landed me in a place of living a more pleasurable, embodied, creative life as a woman. And I never would have understood that relationship. How does one lead to the other if I didn't understand better the nature of victim consciousness and that triangulation you referred to, which is so normative, right? So you find people you commiserate with and you triangulate against the problem in your life. And that problem could be your genes, your chemical imbalance. It could be your narcissistic ex. It could be your abusive mom. It could be some system you've left or religion or whatever that you have empowered as the abuser, as the cause, the reason for this horrible experience you're having in your life. And you never get to taste the fruits of the alchemy because you get arrested in what I call the erotic caress of that enemy. And you do it with other people and it's normalized and it becomes, in truther spaces, it's called a loosh ritual. It becomes this gathering of painful suffering, right? And all of the energetics of that. You could even go so far as to say that we're being farmed for that energy by people on high. And we don't have to go there because you could
Certainly
just,
feels that way, doesn't it?
yeah, you could just go to a social media account and you'll see it playing out, that there are energetic dynamics that meet needs because we don't know that we have a choice to meet them differently. And because it's a very difficult bait to resist, very difficult. And once you start to practice it, you'll never take it again. And if you do, you'll laugh at yourself and recognize that you just did. And that's the culture I have with my friends, for example. If one of my girlfriends is going to complain about her husband, she knows she's not getting anything from me. She's not getting anything from me. Whereas, like, the old me would have piled on and made him wrong and strategized about ways to get him to do the thing and admit he's wrong. It's just so freeing not to give your energy away that way. And until it's a choice, it's actually not. It actually is just the way that you meet your needs. But once you recognize that it is, it's this whole vista opens up.
Can you speak on allowing your partner the freedom to make a mistake?
Mm, yeah. So I have, and I talk a lot about his teachings in The Reclaimed Woman. I've had a teacher called Om Rapani, who is a professional dom, and he teaches BDSM. As a man, we both have very spicy personalities, and we don't agree about everything. However, we've had some very interesting conversations, and he in conjunction with another woman named Laura Doyle, who wrote a book called The Surrendered Wife, have completely revolutionized my perspective. And when I say that, what I mean is that they've given me permission. And I believe that's most of what I do for others. That's what a great teacher does. That's what a mentor does. Sometimes it's just what a friend does. Sometimes it's just what somebody who happens to be standing in a room with you does, and they don't even know that they're offering you this. They can give you permission to see things differently in a way that would have been too threatening to a fundamental aspect of your self concept in another context. And what I have come to understand is that, oh, yeah, when I was a neoliberal feminist and I was a man hater and I believed that men needed to cower and apologize for all of the millennial incidences of patriarchal abuse, whatever, I thought that women were really wonderful and powerful and amazing and they needed to be recognized as such. Like we needed to get ours. It's our turn. And what I find fascinating about the newer teachings I've come to embody is that actually I still hold this belief that women are extraordinarily powerful. We create and give birth to life. Does it get better than that? And we give it away on the regular. And maybe we've even been enculturated, and maybe there's even been orchestrated agendas encouraging us to give that power away and then demand the conditions of our own oppression, which is like the best agendas and socially engineered psychological operations will do that, will encourage the coddled victim to demand more of their own oppression, right? So I happen to be a believer, as somebody who took birth control for 12 years, that it's a perfect example of what we will demand entitlement to as emancipated women is the chemical hijacking of our own female biology and the taking of responsibility for the unequal battlefields that is hookup culture and sexual liberation, right? Is to say, oh, now it's a level field now that nobody's worried about these unplanned conceptions and that I'm having sex and opening my energy to a man who is not a fit partner, right? Not in his father archetype, not a provider. And I'm telling myself that I'm like enjoying this. And this is a symptom and sign that I'm a free woman. Okay. So as somebody who believed all of that, to come to the perspective now that says, actually, I have the power to change any romantic relationship that I'm in. My man does not need to go to couples therapy with me. He does not need to go do ayahuasca. He does not need to address his trauma. He does not even need to know that I am ready to make this change for us. That is very uncomfortable when you've been enculturated to require that your enemy, abuser be the one to apologize and fix it. right? Because we're really good at observing and pattern recognizing, and we can identify all of the ways that our men are doing it wrong. And because of our feminist training, we have developed a lot of masculine competencies. And I've seen this. This is even, I reference that like spiritual transition I'm going through in my business, right? Like, even as female entrepreneurs, there are ways that we hold on to the micromanagement, we hold on to the control, we hold on to the ultimate limiting factor to our experience of feminine energetic flow, of our surrender, of our pleasure. We are standing in our own way. So I am not here as an apologist. I am not here to say men deserve respect and we should give it to them. I'm actually saying, I will say that, but I am actually saying, if this is what you want as a woman, the way to get there is not the way you've been told. Okay. It's not the couples therapy. It's not the making your man wrong. And it's the same thing. This is why I'm in a privileged position to appreciate this, is because it's the same as allopathy. You're told that the antidepressant or the antacid or the antibiotic is the way to beat the problem, but that war will never deliver you to health and wellness. Period. It's not available. I call it buying eggs from the hardware store. They're literally not fucking for sale there. So you can keep trying and demand that they be on the shelves, but they're not for sale there. Okay. So health doesn't come through the pill. We know that. We know that. And harmony and complementarity with your partner does not come through making your man wrong. And I have come to appreciate that there are so many instances of these like microaggressions that we assault our partners with as men. And then we wonder why it is that there are no good men around. Okay. Like, for example, I was out to dinner with my girlfriend recently, and it was just me and her husband, right? And she is very invested and interested in this work, and she's super open and she's here for it. Otherwise, I wouldn't have brought up what I'm about to say. So he's talking about a book, right? And he misspeaks the title. We all know the book title, and he just says the title slightly wrong.
That's not what it is. You're wrong.
Exactly. And she wasn't like shitty or a bitch about it at all. But she was just like, "Oh." And he actually did it 2 times. She's like,
Oh, you mean this?
yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's it. Super benign. The reason I love this example and I share it is because, and I have many examples in the book about this, but it's because we think it's like this big monumental. No, it's in these little daily experiences of, Ohm calls it henpecking, right? But it's the little ways that it's like death by a thousand paper cuts, a thing. And again, this isn't about altruism. I don't even believe in altruism. This is about, how do you actually get aligned and coherent with what you say you want? Because if you don't have what you want, it's because subconsciously you don't want it. That's my belief anyway, and not just mine. Okay, so we're at the table. She corrects him. Later, I'm like, listen, I know it might not seem like a big deal, but I felt in my body like a lot of discomfort in that moment. And I could feel your man's discomfort because he said, "Oh, you're right." That feels good. It feels so good to be right. And when you're right and your husband is wrong, you're married to a fucking loser. Like, you're married to a wrong man who's wrong. All of a sudden, everyone's uncomfortable about that, even if in the moment, right? And this could happen when your man comes to you and asks you for advice about what he should do in his life. I've been in these relationships my whole life. It feels great. I love to be asked for advice about, that means I know things, right? That means I'm good at doing things. That means all of my masculine defenses are being validated because I'm I've made it to a place where I'm asked for advice by the man I choose, right? What Laura Doyle says is that you should always respond with 3 words. Whatever you think. Do you know how hard that is for a good feminist woman
Oh,
who has
I'm
gotten
aware.
who's
I'm
gotten
very
really
aware.
good at knowing better than her man? And again, this in my business, it's all holofractal. I have created a business and I'm seeing it now, like literally in this moment, you're talking to me, like I'm having like the ayahuasca level, like reveal of how I am like creating the conditions for nobody in my business to actually have authority and agency over their role. That does not That's not what they would say. It's not what I would say, but subconsciously and energetically, that's what's happening. And this is what we do in our relationships. It's also what we do with our children. And so anyway, I'm like, why don't you consider apologizing to him for disrespecting him in front of me in that moment? And it's not about me, but just like in that moment. And she was so uncomfortable. She's, can I say it in the dark? She's, oh my God, don't make me. And she's so courageous. She's a very spiritually courageous woman. So this is just to illustrate how difficult this is for us as women to take this level of responsibility. Anyway, she did it. And it was like one of the more moving experiences she told me that they've had, was just like her saying, I'm so sorry for disrespecting you in that moment. And I don't know how you imagine it might be, or if you can relate as a man, but these are the ways that we create the conditions to be partnered with men who we don't allow to fail. And we don't allow them to fail. It's like we have them by the balls and we are simultaneously saying, run faster, and grabbing them in a way that they actually can't. So we set them up for failure, and then we experience what it is to be partnered with a failing man. Okay. When the shift could be that we, then again, Laura Doyle calls it a husband fulfilling prophecy, that we can focus on seeing. And this is what I did for women in my private practice. I could see that their grandeur. I could see them as fully expressed goddesses in front of me while they came in on 5 meds just out of state hospital, like literally not functional. I could somehow see it. And it's not like I have clairvoyant powers or whatever. We have this as women. We have this gift. And so you can see your partner in any way you please. And you can see him as the man who is always right. You can see him as the man who knows exactly what the fuck to do. And when you see him that way, then whatever it is that he fucks up or does wrong or doesn't do the way you wish you did, it just happens. It's just something that is happening. And it's not given the weight that the victim consciousness brought to bear in that dynamic would otherwise choose to weight it down with. Now, the caveat is, do not choose a man you don't respect. Because thanks to feminism, we don't need to partner with men any longer. Okay. That is an option. You don't have to get married. You can do what I'm doing and do it all your damn self. Okay. You don't need to. So if you're going to choose a man, let respect be the primary criteria. And this is something I've learned from Omrapani. When you respect the core of a man, because you exhale, your whole system exhales in his presence. And you get a little taste of what it would be to let him lead and to trust another person and to heal this inner war between the polarities within and without through the dyad, through the free energy technology that is the man-woman relationship. And so many of us, because we haven't done the inner work, because we are in this projection field of our mother and father wounds, we choose men that we don't respect. And then we get all in a tantrum about the fact that they are not worthy of our respect. But from the moment, often in the women I talk to, in my experience, it's like first date in your bones, and you ignore that and you marry the guy and you have years of couples counseling and then divorce and all the things. But what I have come to learn, and why I'm so passionate about like sharing this work, and I think about if I had my own book 15 years ago,
Yeah.
that would have been pretty cool. That would have been great. It's like having the map to the treasure chest or some shit. And I talk about the poor bargain that women make, which is the suppression. And it's not just women, but obviously that's my focus. It's the suppression of awareness of a no, a little no inside, a little no that you're pretending you didn't feel. So you ultimately are betraying yourself in this way, so that no mistakes, so that you could go on this experience of recapitulating your early childhood dynamics and respond differently and organize things differently, have a different experience. So it's all part of the journey. However, there are moments, there's these crossroads we come to where we can make a choice that will expand us or make a choice that will bring us back into the field that we're clearly not ready to exit. And that's also fine. But to know that you have that choice to me seems like the gift we can offer each other. I like to say it's like women, we hold a hand out in the dark for each other. And so that's a lot of what I think is the only point of having these kinds of conversations is in case it just sparks a little bit of remembrance. Yeah.
Yeah. There's also another part about relationships, and that's the potential that we see in the other person. I think a lot of relationships start out that way, where there is a lot of play and you're very much in this relationship with each other, but you don't have a shared mission and vision. You haven't set a 1, 3, 5, or even 10-year plan of what you're actually co creating together. Unfortunately, oftentimes, and we get this a lot from people who have a more anxious attachment style, where they see the potential in the other person so much that they put them on a pedestal and they're just like, this is going to be amazing. They're going to be able to do all these wonderful things. They're not necessarily looking for the evidence of anything in the background that this person's even capable of this or that they desire it. But that's their gift that they have to give. And it's something that they may not be tapped into in the moment. That's something that they can help the other person begin to bring these things to fruition. The problem that we run into is that not far too into marriage, it turns into the criticism. You're doing this wrong. Now I'm trying to mother you. Now I'm trying to parent you. Now I'm trying to be your coach. Then the disconnect. And it, like you said, it's all those little micro cuts throughout the lifetime of the relationship that ultimately the person gets further and further away. And then to try and reclaim that relationship is really difficult. But the other thing that I love that you speak on is that you want to work with the relationship that you have and not necessarily go out and date a million people. You can do that, but to
Mm.
work with the parents, your co-parent in a relationship. I was hoping you could talk about that and then creating a secure attachment with your daughters.
Yeah. So I'll touch on first a couple of other family constellation tenets because I really have appreciated. I learned this framework from Maureen Selenay, who wrote a book on the subject. She talks about the three yeses of love. So when you talked about the tendency that anxiously attached people have to idealize and then to develop a fantasy based relationship with this idealized object, the three yeses, according to family constellation, for actual love, like healthy love, are one, you're 100% yes to the person as they are. So, not when they quit drinking, not when they get a job, literally as they are, the person in front of you.
Yeah,
You're
that's a 10 out of
100%
10, but right?
no,
That but is
right.
always going to be why the relationship ends.
That bud is where your trauma
Yeah.
lives and where your projections of your bad daddy, mommy dynamics get housed. So you're 100% yes to them as they are. You're 100% yes to their parents. This is a big tenet is that when you take your partner's parents as they are, then you are fully taking your partner and not a moment sooner because they come from, right? So life flows in that direction and they come from these people. And it's so common to the point of being normative that you like hate your stepmother or whatever. And you collude with your partner in this triangulation against their own parents. And that doesn't work. And then the last one is that you're 100% yes to you're having different destinies. So your love of this person isn't conditional upon their showing up in your relationship. And I've had that experience with the father of my children. And I've come to conclude that, especially in today's day and age of procreation, it is essential to get to the place where you would choose again the person that you had kids with. Not like literally you're going to make love to them on a sunset beach or something, but you would choose them again. There's all sorts of things to work through constellation with. However, the child will bear the imprint of your regret, remorse, rage, or otherwise experiencing them as something that shouldn't have been. Unless you can get to this place where you embrace your destiny and your choices to such an extent that you would choose it again. Okay, so I am very fortunate that that's very easy for me to do because the dad of my daughters is an extraordinary man and we had separate destinies and we still connect through those separate destinies. That feels like love to me, right? It feels he saw me go my way. Have seen him go his, and we remain connected through that. It's not conditional upon our serving each other in the container. I have become, as somebody, it's almost like you need to go far in a certain direction to appreciate the other. I don't know how else to put it. But as somebody who is twice divorced, once from somebody I had children with and once from somebody I did not, I have come to really advocate for staying in the marriage with the father of your children, however possible. And old me would have said, yeah, but what if it's just you're not a fit anymore and you mature and you change and you evolve and like you need different things and you don't see the world the same way. And that's where Laura Doyle's work. I recently interviewed her on my own podcast and I talk about her work left and center. I don't know, for me, there's really no exceptions anymore because of her work. So like my work in the health space, you can't tell me that chronic illness cannot be cured because I've published it. I know it can be. And in her space, she's saved 15,000 marriages is her credential, and it's abusive marriages, like infidelity, like marriages anyone would throw in the trash. She's got these outcomes and she has these gals on her podcast talking about it. So I've come to understand that we have more power than we thought we had to shift things and change things. And the tenets align with what I already teach, which is you focus first on your own self, your own fulfillment, your own pleasure, your own needs as a woman. You get in your lane, you stay on your page, you fill your cup. Okay. And you orient towards this man as if he's somebody that you respect. Because at some point, hopefully you did at some point in the beginning. And so, given that, the institution actually serves women and children, right? So, there was a phase I went through where I was like, oh, marriage is a shackles. And I was like, polyamory is whatever. I've tried on every hat. Okay. And what I've come to understand is actually the institution. And I'm not talking about the bond that's traded on the market. I'm talking about the covenant, the spiritual covenant of marriage. It serves women and children. And the introduction, like I've come to a place in my life where my girls are probably going to be in the house like another 5 or so years, where I am not available for a romantic relationship until they leave the house, because the introduction of a stepfather when their father exists, right? He didn't pass away, like he's down the street. Okay. It's too treacherous a space, like for me to navigate with grace. I've tried. And I actually think that at this point, I'm in a position to choose motherhood, to choose my role as a mother, which I have never done. And I'm such a romantic that I know that if I was like in a courtship or in a new dynamic, that it would suck all of the energy out of the room. And I could tell myself otherwise. But even pulling back the energetics from my business is enough of a spiritual task to imagine that if I were to run a business and also start a relationship with somebody who is not their father, and to bring this man into their life as if that's something they need or want, is very complicated.
Yeah.
And you could say all day long, oh, but it would never be him. You just look at the stats or talk to a couple women to know that it's a risk that is being introduced for a reward that is potentially secondary to the reward that you would experience as a mother devoted to her children. Now, the exception is if you meet a man who makes your life so much easier as a woman, who comes in hard with provider energy and father archetype energy, that you actually get to be the best mother to those kids that you could be, and that a better mother than you could be without him, if that makes sense. Okay. That is the exception. But just dating a guy who is going to take energy and resources emotionally and energetically away from your children and not actually allow you to exhale in that way, like to potentially not work, to potentially focus your energy elsewhere. For me, from my perspective, this is the complexity you set yourself up for when you leave your first marriage to the father of your children. And maybe you would do that because you don't know the power that you have to evolve it. So a lot of what I've come to with regard to my daughters has been to understand like how my investment in control, right? So all the same stuff that came home to roost in my other relationships was still there with regard to my kids, but it's subtle, right? So I'm like a master manipulator in so many ways
Right.
because I have all of these masculine competencies. So I'm chill, like I'm very chill person, but there's this undercurrent of it's going to be my way that I've been called
I
out
also
for.
have a feeling you might be very sharp with your tongue.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
which is being an Italian Irish
And that
product.
cuts really deep and it's quick and it's subtle and it's not going to come at you with this massive energy. It's just going to be, ah, and the other person has to receive that. And then they might
Yeah.
not know exactly what to do with that.
Yeah, I call it it's not just me. I call it the feminine shadow because I actually recorded a solo podcast about this because this is if we were in a room together and I displeased you and I don't know your temper and I don't know what you're like under pressure, you could literally kill me with your bare hands. You especially, but most men, right? Most men that I interact with can kill me with their bare hands. Okay. What is my weapon? My weapon is shame, that I can diminish you with a sentence. And most women have this pretty well honed. Like we know
Oh,
how
100%.
to, right, how to cut where it hurts with our tongues. And I do think that is a survival tactic that we have developed to balance the scales in some ways and to create that tension of opposites. So yeah, I absolutely am aware of that. And I have,
And also a barrier to connection.
oh, hugely
Yeah.
when that's always at the ready. And that's why if you can remember one thing in relationship, and I'm sure you would agree, it's like, how can you get on the same fucking team? You just get on the same team and resolve the zero sum game energy because it will show up in every single relationship as a sort of a ledger, a negotiation. You did this, so I'm doing that. I have like I had an experience recently. I have so many experiences with my daughters that I teach from because it's subtle, and especially in the holistic health space, there's a very long shadow of how we as mothers imagine that we're doing right by our kids, really pushing them to conform to our definition of what a healthy child does, eats, how they interact with technology, how they interact with other kids, how they interact even with their emotions. And the subtle message is you don't know what's best for yourself. And there's an appropriate time in the development, psychological development of a child where you'll know that it's time to pass the baton and you might resist it anyway, right? There's so many instances with my girls where whether about what they ate or when my eldest developed a relationship that she's still in, got a boyfriend, when I interests like they're supposed to be interested in things that I'm interested in versus not, and or what they want to read or watch or talk to or how they want to dress. All of these opportunities for me to allow them sovereignty and to lean in even when I don't like it versus to subtly influence them to come over to my side, my perspective, and to see it my way. So if I forget that we're on the same team, then I might also forget that my role is to give to my children. So again, this is another constellation tenet. It's like the energy flows downward. I gave them life, I give to them and they give to the world. They don't owe me anything other than gratitude for life.
You mean they're
Okay. So
not an extension of you?
they don't owe me respect. They don't owe me a clean room. They don't owe me dishes put in the dishwasher.
Yeah.
They don't owe me anything. And this gratitude for life. It sounds so like cheesy. I actually dedicated my latest book to my parents for this reason because it's an opportunity for me to thank them for this life. Like literally, not some hallmark figure of speech. Like literally they gave me this and everything else is gravy, right? But that's what they gave me. That's what I thank them for. And the rest is that they've given me, I was meant to pay it forward. to my own kids and to the world. So resolving that reflex, because like I'll tell a story that there was like an occasion and my daughters write me like beautiful letters, and I'm like a words of affirmation girly, so I always love these letters. In fact, I published one of them in this book. And so this occasion came and went, and one of my daughters like didn't give me a letter or a gift or anything. And she's like, "Oh, mama, it's on my computer. Like I'll write it out for you later or whatever." And then it just didn't happen. But the days, every day that went on, I was like, she didn't give it to me yet. Why didn't she give it to me? And I met a part of myself. This is again, because I've done so much of this work, I can say it, but it's shame inducing. I met a part of myself that was like, fine, I'm not going to give her something for her birthday or whatever. I'm her fucking mother. Okay, I adore my children, like, in a way that is, like, impossible to contain in my heart space, and I met that part. Okay,
Yeah.
I could first of all ignore that part ever existed and then just hold this smoldering resentment. I could manipulate based on that part and be like, "Hey, you said you were gonna give me the thing, but you didn't," and or be sarcastic, like, I love doing that. I'll say some sarcastic side of the mouth thing. Or I could actually turn towards that part and interest myself in why that part feels that way and start to learn about a whole dimension of myself that only knows love through the ledger, that only knows love through transaction, that only knows like you do it for me and I'll do it for you. And if I ever get to the point where I say, after all I've done for you, that means punishment is coming your way. So if that's what I learned, of course there's a part that's keeping track. And of course there's a part that's imagining that my kids are in this kind of dynamic with me. But then I have this other energy that can rise up, this self with a capital S, and say, oh, that's right. I give to them. If my kids never give me a damn thing, everything is right in the world. And so that reframe, I'm like a huge advocate for reframes because sometimes it's just you just need that shift and you need the readiness and ripeness to hold it. And all of that erotic energy is reclaimed. All of that vital force that would have been twisted up in like paying attention to whether or not she did the thing. And then how does it feel when it's my turn to do the thing? And all of that is relaxed. And all of that life force comes back to me. So not taking the bait doesn't mean you repress these very real, raw, and usually shameful inner experiences. It means you turn towards them, you interest yourself with curiosity. And I teach a method of doing that. I call it self husbanding, but where you become like this very devoted, attentive presence to yourself in those moments. And you're just, what do you got for me? I'm here for it. Bring it. I can handle it. So that's like my version of the yang signature of the inner masculine that you bring to yourself so that you can start to recreate the conditions of safety in your own body. So where the rejected, like I would have otherwise rejected, it was hard for me a little bit even to say it to you, right? So imagine, I don't want this part to exist. That's gross. That's small. That's stupid. That's wrong. That's like a bad mom thinks that, right? But instead, if I can turn towards it and interest myself in it and bring it like that sacred attention, that gift of the masculine, then I restore the gift of that part. And the energy is liberated to go into other creative things and to move through me instead of getting kinked up. And ultimately, again, I've been on all sides of this aisle. That causes your illnesses, right? That's
Yeah.
called disease later. That's the stakes are that high around this work. And I do think that we're ready for it.
And there's another part that's really beautiful that's actually happening in that process. And you're giving and extending the power of choice to your children to embody their own self and their own compassion and empathy and desires and perception of the world and how they perceive you as individual, not just mom.
Yeah.
And then your energy is that again is all encompassing, that you are there, you are ever present, you're always going to be there, right? That's what you're giving to them, and in return they get to choose to give that back to you. And I can only imagine, because I don't have children, what an amazing feeling that is when they do turn around. And then, because it's the same thing in our romantic relationships, when you allow for these things to happen and then they come back and they still choose you. That's the connection piece that so many of us desire.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
Do you have time for any more questions?
A little teeny bit.
All right, so we can do war on masculinity if you desire to talk about that, or we can do safety versus security.
Yeah, whatever feels right for you.
Thanks for using that on me. I appreciate
That's true.
it. All right. I have a men's group. It's called the Antara Society. So we'll dive into, is there a war on masculinity?
Mm, yes. Although I would say that it's a mirror and there is the same underway against femininity. It's just that's the one that gets the light of day, right? As the feminist agenda has exposed this pain that we are unskilled at working with as women. And so it has put into neon lights the victim story of the woman, right? So most people who've been on this plane in the past couple of decades have come into contact with this idea that women have been oppressed and violated and subjugated and otherwise victimized by men, that we suffered at the hands of men. And I think what the real sort of bait and switch, the dupe of that has been, is that we have not recognized that when we reject the men and the masculine, that we are fundamentally still afraid of for the reasons I already referenced, right? That these are biological realities that you have the capacity to harm me with your bare hands, that I walk every single day of my life in every moment aware some metric of my biology is devoted to vigilance around protecting my form, my vulnerable form in whatever way possible, right? So when I forget that reality or I pretend it doesn't exist or it can somehow be expunged through anger and righteousness, then I take the bait that says that even though I reject you, I want to be more like you and I want to have what you have as a man. Right? So in doing so, I am rejecting and participating in the war against my own femininity, my female biology, right? Through birth control and medicalized birth and formula feeding and antidepressants, right? I am participating in the rejection of my emotions, of my cycles, of my stewardship of the species, right? I am rejecting that. So, what is the mirror of that? Is there a way that men have been enculturated to reject their own masculinity? Yes, is the answer. And it's a subtle but very profound layer of the feminist agenda, but it also has its own, like I would say the new age is one of the henchmen of this war on masculinity. But at the root of it is, again, because I come from the perspective of the power that we have as women, the root of our unmetabolized angst and pain and suffering as women has grown this poisonous plant of castrated men, energetically castrated men by shadow mommies, right? So when these hurt women raise sons, what do these sons need to do? They need to be good boys. They need to hide their healthy aggression. They need to transmute their sexual energy in, and especially dark sexual energy, into appeasement of mommy who does not know how to regulate her own system emotionally, who needs this boy who is fundamentally made of the same scary material that all of those violators and abusers were. She needs him to be subdued. None of this is conscious, obviously. This is done with the best of intentions and with love. But women who are unactualized in these ways we're talking about today will raise castrated sons, energetically castrated sons, and they will raise these lambs and then be in the world complaining that there are no wolves. Right? That's what Omrapani says. And this means that we have power, right? We have power to raise our sons differently, and to really to heal and integrate what otherwise would continue as that warfare posture. Because the confusion, again, I don't know, you can speak to this, but the confusion that men must feel today about how to be a man is the mirror of the confusion that we feel as women, right? Because are you supposed to have your balls in your hand and feel like you've got this and you know how to handle it, or are you supposed to be apologizing? Are you supposed to be nice? Are you supposed to open the car door or not? Is that offensive? Like, the framing of healthy masculine aggression as something to apologize for begins in childhood, right? Like, it begins with these shadow mommy experiences of our side of the aisle, and then it gets recapitulated over and over again generationally. So I think that a lot of the seeded movements have also served to frame men as toxic, to frame men as fundamentally untrustworthy, as fundamentally subjected to like primal impulses that are untrustworthy, as being really the source of our problems as women. That if we could just get them in line, that everything would be fine. And I think that this is why the most radical thing we can do today in this moment is for men to heal with men, women to heal with women, and for us to restore the remembrance of the natural contract that we have together, which is women to be, to simply be, and for men to do in service. And that does not mean that women don't do, and it does not mean that men never get to relax. It just means that there's natural dynamic energy in polarity that can be restored and even experienced anew. I actually think we're at a point in the evolution of our species where we have an opportunity to experience this dyad, this dynamic between men and women that has never existed before. And it's thanks to so much of what has happened, right? Because of feminism and all of its nefarious potential intentions, I now can choose to be a surrendered wife. I can choose to make seven figures or tend to garden, make a pastry, raise my children. I can choose to have a medicalized birth or a birth with nobody there but me. These choices allow for an intentionality and a vectorized energy that never really existed before. And men can make very similar choices, right? You can choose an egalitarian dynamic where your wife is the breadwinner, where you're both bringing home 50% of the bacon. You can choose to never interact with a woman or to have 10 kids. All of this soup that we're in of neutralized confusion and disconnection from our native essence, I think now is culminating in an opportunity to remember the power that I call it a free energy technology, the power that is available between men and women, both romantically and erotically, but also even contractually in the world, right? The way I interact with the guy at the grocery store, with my neighbor, with my uncle, with my brother, it serves me to show men appreciation, admiration, and respect. It serves me. So I'm a believer in sacred selfishness, right? So if I know that I'm always meeting my needs, always, even when it looks like I'm doing something for somebody else, then I can organize my priorities in such a way where I say, what kind of world do I want to live in? And I would say, even though I've been told as a woman, I want to live in a world where I feel free and I feel powerful. What I've concluded as somebody who has all the trappings that should afford me that is that I actually would just want to feel safe. I just want to feel safe. Women want to feel safe. And we will not be offered that experience. We will not even know how to create the conditions for that until we begin to recognize what that feels like in our own systems, to take steps towards offering ourselves that safety and creating the conditions for that safety to be experienced, which we cannot do when we are in our fight, flight, freeze physiology, when we are seeing an intruder, when there's a pile of laundry on a chair. So when we're projecting all of our inner boogeymen, we will live in an unsafe world. You can have the most perfect husband, the most perfect emancipated life as an independent woman. it doesn't matter. You will live behind a glass wall. You will experience the hollowness of even your peak moments, because this safety it's an expectation that our systems have. And I think the plot twist is that we, at this point in our development, have the tools to begin to offer that to ourselves, to self-husband in this way, and then to attract experiences that are a direct reflection of that inner union, that inner marriage that has come online.
Absolutely amazing. I love every bit of that. And I think people need to understand that all of this is a lot closer than you think that it is.
Yeah,
If you're willing to open up that door and step into it and embrace our complementary natures and to come back together in union with one another and to develop the relationship that we truly desire by allowing each other to be ourselves and then to come together with that shared mission and vision.
totally.
Kelly Brogan, tell everybody how to reach you and a little bit about your book that comes out on June 25th.
Yes, I am at kellybroganmd.com, and the book is called The Reclaimed Woman, and it just feels like the culmination of about 800 dark nights of the soul, and really is intended to be a step-by-step roadmap through quite treacherous terrain that is so worth traveling as a woman. So I recognized also that, unlike my other books, this isn't really something that you can do on your own, right? Like, you can come off your meds, you can shed your diagnoses, you can do that work on your own. It's amazing in community, but you can do it on your own. I think of that as like the masculine initiation. And this feminine initiation, I do believe, is meant to be done with other women who normalize this, right? Because imagine if you're in a lifescape where your closest female allies are invested in their own victimhood, it's so challenging, if not impossible, to hold this new way of being, to practice it together. So I created a companion program that we're doing live only once. That's the plan anyway, starting July 8th. And it's called Reclaimed. And so I'll be in there, I'll be teaching live, and we will be rocking it out together as women who are dedicated to changing our story about what it is to be a woman today. So that will also be available.
I'll make sure that is linked in the show notes. And don't forget to check out Reclamation Radio, Kelly's
Oh, yeah.
podcast. There are so many wonderful episodes with so many people that I enjoy. Your Teal Swan episode was absolutely amazing. I got a lot of value from that one.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, it's fun. Super fun. I love
Yeah.
podcasting. I didn't
Yeah.
expect to.
Me either. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of the Blueprint Podcast. If you enjoyed our conversations, I want to invite you to join our communities. The Blueprint is for everyone, focusing on healing the relationship you have with yourself. And I also have the Antara Society, which is a group for men who are dedicated to networking, support, and brotherhood. Connect with us and continue your journey of growth and connection. You can join these two communities by going to the link in my bio and signing up today. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again on the Blueprint Podcast.